Just 5 years after the devastation of World War II, France and Germany, nations that had been locked in bitter conflict for generations, made a decision that stunned the world. Instead of continuing their rivalry, they chose to intertwine their economies, not by force or coercion, but by a conscious act of will. This was a remarkable shift, considering the deep wounds and mistrust that lingered from the war. The idea of placing coal and steel, the very backbone of military power and industrial might, under a shared supranational authority was unprecedented in history. These resources had fueled wars for decades, yet now they would become the building blocks of peace. This bold move shattered centuries of rivalry and suspicion, signaling the start of a new European chapter. It was a leap of faith, a signal to the world that old enemies could choose a different path. The devastation left by war was everywhere. Cities in ruins, families displaced, economies in shambles. Leaders realized that repeating the old patterns of conflict would only lead to more suffering and destruction. Instead of imposing another punitive peace, as had happened after previous wars, they sought a new approach. To make war not just unthinkable, but truly impossible through cooperation and shared interests. The solution was pragmatic and visionary. Bind their economies so tightly together that any future conflict would be self-destructive for all involved. Economic interdependence would become the strongest safeguard against war. This bold alliance, known as the European Coal and Steel Community, became the foundation for what would eventually grow into the European Union, a union that would transform the continent. It was a radical bet on the future, that former enemies could become partners, working side by side to build lasting peace and shared prosperity for generations to come. In the shattered remains of post-war Europe, where cities lay in ruins and hope was scarce, leaders like Schuman, Adenauer, and de Gasperi dared to imagine a new order rising from the ashes. Surrounded by devastation, they saw not just the destruction, but the possibility for a different future, one built on unity rather than division. These men weren't naive dreamers. They were pragmatic realists, shaped by the horrors of war and the bitter lessons of nationalism's destructive power. They understood that old rivalries had brought only suffering and that something fundamentally new was needed. Their answer was bold yet practical, to pool sovereignty in crucial areas, forging cooperation that would make future wars not just unthinkable, but impossible, while still honoring the unique identities of their nations. United by a shared commitment to reconciliation and mutual trust, they reached out to one another in a time when suspicion and fear ran deep. Their willingness to work together was itself a radical act. Instead of attempting a sweeping constitution or grand political union, they chose to begin with the basics: coal and steel, the very resources that had fueled conflict. By focusing on these industries, they laid a practical foundation for peace. Jean Monnet, the quiet architect behind the scenes, championed an incremental approach. He believed that small, concrete steps would build trust and set off a chain reaction of integration, gradually weaving the nations of Europe closer together. By sharing control over these vital resources, they cleverly sidestepped the explosive issue of national pride, turning former sources of rivalry into symbols of cooperation. This was more than a treaty. It was the first step toward a new kind of European governance, one based on partnership and shared responsibility. These leaders weren't just rebuilding shattered cities and economies. They were redesigning the very architecture of the continent's politics, laying the groundwork for a lasting peace. Their vision, forged in the aftermath of catastrophe, created the foundations for a Europe where shared interests and cooperation would finally overcome the old animosities that had divided the continent for centuries. After the war, Europe teetered on the edge of collapse, its cities reduced to rubble, economies shattered, and millions of people displaced from their homes. Food was scarce, infrastructure was in ruins, and the threat of extremism was rising as desperate populations searched for hope and stability. The United States recognized that Europe's recovery was not just a humanitarian concern, but vital to its own security and the stability of the world. American leaders feared that if Europe failed to recover, Soviet influence would spread unchecked across the continent, threatening democracy and freedom. In response, The Marshall Plan was launched, offering billions of dollars in aid to help rebuild Europe. But this assistance came with a crucial condition. European nations had to work together and coordinate their recovery efforts to receive the funds. This requirement forced former enemies to sit at the same table, leading to the creation of the Organization for European Economic Cooperation, a groundbreaking step toward unity and collaboration. The Marshall Plan's impact was immediate and far-reaching. It helped rebuild factories, restore vital industries, stabilize currencies, and distribute desperately needed humanitarian aid, averting a continent-wide disaster. Even more importantly, it provided training for a new generation of European leaders, teaching them to negotiate, compromise, and cooperate, skills that would become the foundation for future European integration. The Marshall Plan also played a pivotal role in reintegrating West Germany into the European community, shifting Allied policy from punishment to partnership and helping to heal old wounds. By providing this economic lifeline, the United States made it possible for European nations to pursue political unity and cooperation on a scale never seen before. Leaders like Robert Schuman and Jean Monnet found the stability and support they needed to pursue their vision of a peaceful, united Europe. The Marshall Plan was more than just financial aid. It was the catalyst that sparked the movement toward a united and prosperous Europe, inspiring hope and cooperation. In the end, it transformed a continent gripped by desperation into one defined by cooperation, resilience, and a shared vision for the future. On May 9, 1950, Robert Schuman proposed a revolutionary idea: place Franco-German coal and steel under a common authority. This wasn't just economic cooperation. It was a political strategy to make war impossible. Jean Monnet's plan targeted the very resources that fueled past conflicts. By pooling coal and steel, the Schuman Plan neutralized historic rivalries at their source. The high authority would be a supranational body, able to make binding decisions. This was a bold leap beyond traditional alliances. West Germany, eager for rehabilitation, embraced the proposal. The swift Franco-German agreement formalized a new era of trust. The Schuman Declaration became the cornerstone of European integration. It was the first institutional step toward the European Union. A handshake across the Rhine became a blueprint for peace. The Schuman Declaration quickly became reality. In 1951, 6 nations, France, West Germany, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, signed the Treaty of Paris, creating the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC. For the first time, countries handed control of vital industries to a shared institution. The ECSC's structure, High Authority, Assembly, Council, and Court, set the template for future European bodies. Its main goal, a single tariff-free market for coal and steel, eliminating economic barriers and nationalist competition. This web of interdependence made war between members increasingly illogical. The ECSC's success proved pooled sovereignty could work. It turned former enemies into daily collaborators. The experiment gave leaders confidence to pursue deeper integration. The ECSC was the first real test and triumph of European unity. The ECSC's success inspired its 6 members to go further. In 1957, they signed the Treaties of Rome, creating the European Economic Community, EEC, and Euratom. The EEC aimed for a common market, free movement of goods, services, capital, and people. This required harmonizing laws and removing trade barriers over 12 years. The EEC expanded the ECSC's institutions, laying the foundation for today's EU structure. Integration shifted from specific sectors to the entire economy. Despite political crises, the logic of the common market prevailed. The EEC spurred growth and prosperity, transforming Western Europe into a global economic force. The Treaty of Rome marked a decisive step toward a shared European destiny. European integration was as much about rebuilding trust as building institutions. Decades of war left deep suspicion between nations. The ECSC forced former enemies to work side by side, turning rivals into colleagues. Daily cooperation replaced conflict with compromise. Initiatives like European schools and later, the Erasmus program fostered a new transnational generation. Shared experiences eroded old prejudices from the ground up. The peace in Western Europe is built on relationships, not just treaties. The founders knew trust grows from shared work, not grand speeches. The EU's construction was also the reconstruction of trust. The road from the ECSC to the EU was long and fraught with challenges. National sovereignty remained a sticking point, with leaders like de Gaulle resisting supranational power. Enlargement brought new complexities, especially with the UK and later Eastern European states. Each new member added diversity and difficulty. Yet integration triumphed. The single market, the Maastricht Treaty, and the euro transformed Europe. The EU helped consolidate democracy in Southern and Eastern Europe. Its soft power attracted neighbors to reform and join. Despite setbacks, cooperation consistently overcame division. The EU's journey proved the power of unity over history's divisions. Today, the European Union stands as a testament to its founders' vision. It's a unique union of 27 states and 450 million people. More than an organization, less than a federation. The legacy of early alliances is everywhere, from the euro to open borders. War between members is now unthinkable. The EU's institutions and single market are global models. Cooperation now extends to science, environment, and more. Yet, challenges remain: economic gaps, migration, nationalism, and geopolitical crises. The tension between national and shared authority endures. Still, the EU is the world's most successful peace project, a daily exercise in compromise and solidarity. Its story proves that even the deepest conflicts can be overcome by visionary leadership and shared purpose.